Let's talk about the renal replacement therapy. So start to think about renal replacement therapy when the CKD has reached the stage 4 or stage 5. So in any kind of the CKD, the last treatment that we should think about is actually renal replacement therapy. So renal replacement therapy comprises of the two things, that is transplant and the dialysis. Now you should consider one thing in mind, that usually the allogenic kidney transplant is taken as much more better than the dialysis. Allogenic kidney transplant is much more better than dialysis, but though practically the transplant is somehow difficult. Why it is difficult? As first of all, there should be the HLA matching. The HLA should be matched. Another thing, there should be blood grouping matching. Blood group should be matched. And there should be some donor who can donate you kidney. And usually so these things, due to the HLA matching, blood grouping matching, donor availability, it actually transplantation requires a large amount of money. So it is expensive process. So that's why in many cases it is not so much practical that we will do kidney transplant. It is better, but it is not somehow practical. So usually up to the time when the kidney transplant is not possible, either you can save the patient by the dialysis. Yes, so transplant is better, but you will not do this more often due to these things. Yes, if these things are okay, then 100% allogenic transplant is the best treatment. But these things require so much time, money, and so much matching, the donor availability, and multiple factors. That's why we should practically focus on the dialysis. So see how the dialysis works and what are the types of dialysis. Let's start. Now let's talk about the dialysis. So dialysis is a process where the water, solute, toxins are removed from the blood. And basically there are two types of dialysis. One is the hemodialysis, another is the peritoneal dialysis. It is very obvious that the hemodialysis is very good than the peritoneal dialysis. So hemodialysis is better preferred than the hemodialysis. But both has their own value. Let's see what are the different thing in both. Simply, you should know one thing, that the hemodialysis remove the waste and water from the body, outside body. Actually, it remove the waste and water of the blood outside the body via a filter that is known as dialyzer. And that dialyzer contains a semi-permeable membrane. So simply what here the doctor will do. So let's suppose he is a patient. Now his blood is taken into a machine. This machine is known as dialyzer. And in the dialyzer, actually the filtration take place, and again the blood is entered into his body. So in this way, the external machine is used, or the dialyzer is used to filter his blood. So this type of concept is in hemodialysis. But in peritoneal dialysis, see, hemodialysis requires a very special training. Hemodialysis require a machine, that is dialyzer, and hemodialysis is actually a very time consuming process. But main thing is that the hemodialysis should have a very tertiary, that hemodialysis require a tertiary care management in the very large hospital. But where the patients are not easily go into the large hospital, where the hemodialysis facility is not available, there the peritoneal dialysis is done. Usually the peritoneal dialysis remove the water and waste product inside the body. It do not use any machine. It actually remove the waste and water product inside the body, and here the peritoneum will act as a natural semi-permeable membrane. Here what we will do, that let's suppose he is a patient, and what the doctor will do, let's suppose this is a viscera, and let's suppose this is a peritoneal cavity. The doctor will actually insert a solution. That solution is known as dialysate. This solution is actually entered into the peritoneal cavity, and this solution actually is a kind of due to diffusion, this solution takes up the waste product from the all the viscera and the organs, and now the dilysate solution contain all the toxin, and now it is removed from the body. So in this way peritoneal dialysis is done. What I have said, let me repeat again, that in the peritoneal cavity a dilysate solution is inserted, and this dilysate solution when inserted in the peritoneal cavity, they will actually absorb the water, waste product and toxins in them, and now and at last the water, toxin and the waste products are now removed along with the dilysate solution, and in this way the peritoneal dialysis is done. And basically the peritoneum will act as a semi-permeable membrane here, and it do not require any machine, and just a normal training can be enough for peritoneal dialysis. That's why somehow in the remote areas where the hemodialysis is not available, there the peritoneal dialysis is done. But yes, why it is better, why hemodialysis is better, as there is a you see that we actually puncture the body multiple time while the time of withdrawing the fluid from the peritoneal cavity while inserting the dialyzer. So that's why it is a type of invasive process in the abdominal cavity, and that's why there is a more chance of infection. So that due to the chance of infection, it is somehow not good. But yes, to prevent life, somehow we should know this also. But where the facilities are available, hemodialysis is done. I have already said you, the from the venous line the blood is taken into the dialyzer, and again and the filtered blood is sent into the body. So these are the two processes. So in this picture you can easily see the person is on the dialysis now, and this machine is basically the dialyzer machine, and where the filtration of the blood take place, and from the one vein the blood is taken into the dialyzer, and the filtered blood is again resent into the body. So in this way the hemodialysis is done. But yes, you should know one thing in mind, that this hemodialysis actually it should be done 3 times per week. It should be done 3 times per week, and each session lasts for 4 hours. Each session lasts for 4 hours. So somehow it will decrease the quality of life of the person, as in 1 week the person has to come 3 times in the hospital, and each session lasts for greater than 4 hours or up to 4 hours. So somehow it is a time consuming process, the hemodialysis. So see, now this is a peritoneal dialysis, and you can easily see this is a peritoneal cavity, and first of all the in the dialysate bag there is a solution known as dilysate solution, and this dilysate solution is inserted into the peritoneal cavity, and this solution see, at first this solution is blue in color. It is now it is not having any kind of toxin, but later what happened, it is actually withdrawing the toxin, blood, waste product, water from the peritoneal organs, and now the color of the fluid is become yellowish in nature due to the presence of toxin, and the level of the fluid is also increased due to the actually somehow withdrawing the water, waste product from the peritoneal organ into the dialyzer solution, and the dialyzer solution level is also increased, and its color is changed due to the toxins, and now it is taken out into the drainage bag. So in this way the peritoneal dialysis is done.
This can also be done to treat acute kidney failure, which occurs when your kidneys stop working suddenly, or to remove drugs or poisons from your body. In one type of dialysis, called hemodialysis, your doctor will use a machine called a dialyzer to clean your blood outside your body. Some weeks or months before you begin hemodialysis, your doctor will prepare a vascular access site on your body. Your doctor will create either an arteriovenous graft or an arteriovenous fistula to access your bloodstream. To begin, he or she will numb the area with local anesthesia. To construct an arteriovenous graft, your surgeon will make a small incision in your forearm and insert a soft plastic tube called a graft to connect an artery to a vein. To create an arteriovenous fistula, your surgeon will make a small incision in your skin and connect an artery with a vein to make a larger vessel called a fistula. Once your vascular access site has healed, your doctor can start hemodialysis. To begin, your dialysis nurse will insert 2 needles into your AV fistula or graft. Once the circuit is set up, your blood will flow slowly out of your body and through the dialyzer. Inside the dialyzer, your blood will encounter filtering fibers and an absorbent cleaning solution called dialysate. The fibers will remove waste and excess fluids and electrolytes from your blood. Your cleaned blood will emerge from the dialyzer and continue through the tubing back into your body through the second needle at your access site. When your hemodialysis session is complete, the needles and tubing are removed, and you can go home. In another type of dialysis, your doctor will use the membranes lining your abdomen, called the peritoneum, to clean your blood without removing it from your body. Before you begin peritoneal dialysis, you will have an operation to implant a soft tube called a catheter. Your surgeon will insert the catheter near your belly button, creating a port through which the dialysate will enter and leave your abdomen. Each peritoneal dialysis session is called an exchange. First, you will use your catheter to fill your abdomen with dialysate for a period of time determined by your doctor. Through the peritoneal membrane, waste products and extra fluid are continuously drawn out of your blood into the dialysate. Along with the waste materials it absorbed, the dialysate will drain out of your abdomen into a disposable collection bag during your exchange.
Once the doctor plans for the hemodialysis, he needs such vessel where the rule of 6 can be applied. So what is rule of 6? So there are some conditions. First condition is the diameter of the vessel should be at least 6 mm. It can be more than 6 mm, but at least the diameter of vessel should be 6 mm. So why we need a large diameter vessel? The reason is that we will actually take the blood from large diameter vessels. It will be easy to actually access the large diameter vessel, and another thing, it will be easy for the blood to come and the blood again to inject in the vessel where the diameter is large. Another thing, the skin to vessel distance should be less than 6 mm. So skin to vessel distance should be less than 6 mm. Why? To avoid the pain. If there will be very large distance between the skin and the vessel, then there will be much pain while puncturing the vein. But if the distance is less, then there will be less pain. And the thing, the flow in the vessel, the blood flow in the vessel should be at least 600 ml per minute. Why there should be a large, a high pressure flow? It is due to the reason that in the high pressure flow there is a less chance of thrombophlebitis. So what is thrombophlebitis? Thrombophlebitis is basically the inflammation of vein, basically the inflammation of, we can say, the blood vessel, and this inflammation of blood vessels will lead to the clotting of blood in them, and such a thrombophlebized vessel is not used for hemodialysis. But what happens that in the normal vessel, if we use the normal vessel for the hemodialysis, then we have to at least puncture the vessel. And once you puncture let's suppose you are puncturing the vein, then the vessels can have the thrombophlebitis, and the thrombophlebitis vessel is not used for the now once it is thrombophlebitised, it needs time to it needs time to cure this thrombophlebitic condition in the vessel. And hemodialysis, in the hemodialysis process, every second day of the week we have to go for the hemodialysis. As we know, the hemodialysis frequency is 3 times per week. It means in every 3 times per week, it means that in every 2 days you have to once go for the hemodialysis. And if one of the vessel has a thrombophlebitis, then in next time when you will come for the hemodialysis, then this same vessel cannot be used for the hemodialysis, so you have to use another vessel. And if you continuously use the different vessels for the hemodialysis, there will be a time come where you have no any vessels left in the body, and then what you will do? That's why we will create a high flow in the vessel. So this high flow in the vessel, high blood flow in the vessel will actually prevent the thrombophlebitis. And once the thrombophlebitis is prevented, then the same vessel can be used for hemodialysis for long time. Then the same vessel can be used for the hemodialysis for the long time. So that is why we want such a vessel where the flow in the vessels is high. And another condition is the length of the vessel should be at least 6 cm. Why we need a length of vessel at least where the length should be at least 6 cm? As we need 2 sides in the vessels where we can puncture. From one side we will actually take the blood, and from another side we will again administer the filtered blood in the body. So from one side we will take the unfiltered blood, and in another side we will actually administer the filtered blood in the body, in the vessel. So that's why we need such condition where the rule of 6 can be applied. Okay, but ideally speaking, there are no any vessels in the body, no vessels in the body where you can have all these features, where the diameter will be at 6 mm, where the skin to vessel distance will be 6 mm, or where the flow will be 600 ml per minute and the vessel length will be at least 6 centimeter. So these such a conditions are not the whole condition matching vessels is not present in the body. That's why we will create such vessel by using the vein of the body where the rule of 6 can be applied. So let's see how we will create it. So now let's suppose that this is a radial artery, this is a cephalic vein, and we want the cephalic vein, we will actually convert the cephalic vein into such vessel where the rule of 6 can be applied, or all the condition of rule of 6 will get matched. So how will you create how will you transform the cephalic vein into such vessel? So let's see what we will do. That we will actually create a fistula between the radial artery and the cephalic vein. We will create a fistula between the radial artery and cephalic vein. This fistula was first created by the two doctors, we can say, that is known as Brescia, Semino. So there were two scientists and their team, but mainly Brescia and Semino made this fistula first. So this fistula is known as Brescia-Semino fistula. And this fistula, what it will do, that we know that the blood flow in the radial artery is high. The blood flow in the radial artery is high, but why we will not use the radial artery as the vessel, as we know that the radial artery diameter is less and the skin to vessel distance is greater than 6 mm. So we will not use the radial artery. Why we will not use the cephalic vein only? As the vessel to skin distance is less than 6 mm, so this is good. The diameter is less, but the diameter is less than 6 mm. So first of all thing, then this vein alone also this vein cannot be used, but we will transform this vein where the rule of 6 can be applied. So let's see how the fistula will actually transform this vein. So now look, the whatever the pressure is in the artery, the from the high pressure arterial blood, that blood will come into the vein, and whenever this high pressure arterial blood comes into the vein will actually will have a high pressure system. So the vein will also have the high pressure. So there will be high pressure in the veins, high pressure in veins. Why there is a high pressure in veins? As the pressure from the arteries are transmitted to the vein as the arterial blood is coming to the vein. And another thing, that due to this high pressure in the veins, for 4 to 6 week will cause the venous distension, will cause the venous distension. And once the venous system is distended, then the diameter will be enlarged and it will be greater than 6 mm. So this also condition is matched. Another thing is that the pressure from the high pressure blood is coming to the vein, then the blood flow in the vein will also increase. So the blood flow in the vein will be almost 600 ml per minute or more. So the blood flow in the vein will be 600 ml per minute or more. So so in this way, once the fistula is created, the vessels has transformed, and the vein is transformed, that it has now high pressure. The diameter is actually diameter is increased, that is greater than 6 mm, and we know that the veins are usually superficial to the skin, so that it is the skin to vessel distance is also less, and as there is high flow, then less chance of thrombophlebitis, and the venous system is now distended. So this distension of venous system is known as arterialization of vein. The distension of venous system is known as arterialization of vein. Arterialization of vein. So what is arterialization of vein? So arterialization of vein is basically venous distension due to the high pressure blood from the artery coming to the vein. Okay, so due to this reason, the fistula is created. This fistula is known as Breccia seminofistula. And sometimes what the doctors can do, doctor can just without making fistula, the doctor can just put a plastic pipe in between the artery and vein, but the purpose remain again the same. Okay, so either you make a fistula or you put a plastic pipe between the artery and vein, but the purpose will remain the same. And in this way the fistula is created, and once the fistula is created, then you can use multiple times the same vein for the hemodialysis. So in this picture I will tell you how the hemodialysis machine works. So you should know one thing, that the hemodialysis machine has the name of the machine is basically dialyzer. So the name of the machine of the hemodialysis is dialyzer, and a solution is used to actually filter the blood. This solution is known as dialysate. The solution is known as dialysate. This dilated solution is actually used to filter the blood. And now how it works, let's see. Let us suppose that this is the dialyzer machine, and the blood is actually taken from the person, and once the blood is taken, the blood is coming to the dialyzer machine, and once the blood entered the dialyzer machine, there is actually a pipe, as we have already seen in the video, there is a pipe, and this pipe is actually semi-permeable pipe. So we can say that this pipe acts as a semi-permeable membrane. This pipe acts as a semi-permeable membrane. Now, by the diffusion process, all the nitrogenous waste like urea, creatinine, the excess potassium, and all the toxins are actually filtered into the, or they actually goes to the dilysate solution. So the urea, creatinine, and the other all toxins get filtered into the dilysate machine, and the dilysate solution, and the dilysate solution is now actually polluted, or you can say all the waste or excretory product present in the blood is taken by the dilysate solution and is removed out. But this dilysate solution also work better, as let us suppose if you have to put any kind of drug in the body, then you can just put into the dilysate solution. From the dilysate solution, it will enter into the blood, and if you want to put any vitamins, or you want to put any glucose or any important materials, then it can be again resent into the blood. So the two process take place. One process is just removal of toxins, and another process is entering of the requiring agent from the dilysate solution. So another thing is administration of useful products in blood. And you have to know that this semi-permeable membrane acts very selectively, that it will allow only the excretory materials to actually release out, but it will not allow the blood. So the dialyzer machine acts as a very selectively, and it will only allow the toxins to remove, and it will not allow the useful products of the blood to remove from the blood. And after once the all event take place here in the machine, then the useful products or the filtered blood, we can say, comes out, and now again it is resent to the body of the person. Now it is again resent to the body of the person, and now it is again resent. So in this way this machine work, and this due to the reason that it acts very selectively, it is also known as ultrafiltration, or we can say it is actually selective. It is actually facilitated type of here the diffusion process occurs so much selectively that it will only allow the very smaller or the waste product to pass out. So the diffusion process is known as facilitated diffusion, and such a filtration is known as ultrafiltration. You should also know one thing in mind, that the direction of the blood flow and the direction of the dilysate flow is just opposite, like the counter current mechanism. It means the blood is flowing in this direction, then the dilysate is flowing in this direction. So it's just like the counter current mechanism. So the mechanism of the flow of blood flow here is counter current mechanism. So it just function. Why the mechanism is like counter current? Just to replicate the kidney. So as we know, in the kidney also it acts as a counter current mechanism, all the filtration process. That's why here also the machine acts as a counter current mechanism. The blood flow and the dilysate flow will run in opposite direction, like the counter current mechanism. But yes, everything has a one bad side also. So there is somehow complications related to the dialysis. So the complication of the hemodialysis are basically the hypotension. So usually after the dialysis, the blood is actually filtered and the amount of blood is also reduced. So it will ultimately cause the hypotension. Another thing, there can be chance of infection as we are puncturing the vein multiple times. Another thing, that it will decrease the cardiovascular mortality. So see, this is somehow controversial thing, that if you will not treat the CKD, then also there will be cardiovascular mortality, and if you will treat CKD, then also there will be cardiovascular mortality. So the cardiovascular mortality is somehow that thing that you cannot remove from the CKD patient. Another thing, there will be vitamin loss. Though there is the facilitated type of diffusion in the hemodialysis, that the vitamins are somehow tried not to remove from the blood, but though also some vitamin get lost, and it may cause the peripheral neuritis. It may cause the peripheral neuritis. Another thing, that there can be the myopathy, there is a muscle destruction after the hemodialysis, and yes, there is a dialysis dementia. There is a problem known as dialysis dementia. So this dialysis dementia is basically due to the accumulation of A beta 2 amyloid protein. A beta 2 amyloid protein. So this is a protein that is usually that should be removed from the dialysis machine, but the dialysis machine cannot remove this A beta 2 amyloid protein, and due to which it accumulates and it will ultimately cause the dementia. So it is also known as dialysis dementia. So the last thing we have to discuss on the for the indication of hemodialysis. So there is a trick known as AEIOU G. You know this AEIOU are the vowels, and so from A there is acidosis. So if there is a metabolic acidosis, that is refractory to medication. So if any person has the CKD and has having the metabolic acidosis, but that is not curing by the medication, and the pH falling below 7.2, then you will start the hemodialysis. Another thing, if there is a hyperkalemia or hyperphosphatemia and that is not curing by the conservative treatment or the medication, then you will go for the hemodialysis. And if there is if there is an ingestion of the ethylene glycol, this ethylene glycol will cause the rapid renal failure. So this if any person has ingested ethylene glycol, then also you can go for the hemodialysis. O, volume overload. So from O there is overload. So if there is a volume overload and if it is causing the pulmonary edema, then also you can go for the hemodialysis. And from U, if there is a uremic pericarditis, if there is a seizure, if there is a uremic manifestation, then you will go for the hemodialysis. And from the G, if the GFR is less than 15 ml per minute, then also you will go for the hemodialysis. So these were the absolute indication for the hemodialysis. And now let's talk about the kidney transplant or renal transplant. So usually the kidney transplant or renal transplant, before transplanting, there are some necessary things that we need to know. First of all, the thing is the matching of the HLA, that is human leukocyte antigen. So what is HLA? So HLA are basically the antigen present on the WBC of the humans. So leukocyte means the WBC and antigen means antigen. So whatever the WBC has the antigens over them, that is known as human leukocyte antigens. And everyone has some antigen in their leukocytes. Now if we are transferring or if you are transplanting the kidney from one person to another person, then the person who is giving the kidney are known as donors, and and that person who is taking the kidney are known as recipient. So the leukocyte contains the antigen. So donor will also have some antigens in his leukocyte, and the recipient will also have some antigens in his leukocytes. But the antigens in both the leukocyte should somehow matched, not 100%, but yes, they should be matched at least 50-60% or more than that. So the donor blood, so if the HLA match at least 50 to 60% between the donor and recipient, then the donor kidney will not be rejected. So for the acceptance of the donor kidney by the recipient, there should be at least matching of the HLA 50 to 60% between the donor and the recipient. So this thing you have to keep in mind, that we have to do first. There is HLA matching, and let's see what are the things in HLA. So the types of HLA are HLA A, B, C, and DP, DQ, and we have DR. So there are different types of HLA: A, B, C, DP, DQ, and DR. These all are types of HLA. So let us suppose if the donor is me, the donor is me, and the recipient is my cousin, then at least I should match A, B, and DR. A, B, and DR, HLA A, HLA B, and HLA DR in both. So let's suppose that my HLA is 2444183, and my cousin HLA AB and DR are like this: 2, 8, 3, 3, 44, and 4. Now let's see that the HLA, so in total there are 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in 6, only one is matching, another all are not matching. So we can say that the matching of the HLA is 1 upon 6. So if the match will be 1 upon 6, then it will be rejected. So the match should be at least 4 upon 6 or the 5 upon 6. So to get accepted into the recipient body, the match should be at least 4 upon 6, 5 upon 6, or at least minimum of 3 upon 6. So let's suppose if he has 3 here and if here is also a 3, and let's suppose here is 4, here is also 4, then at least the 3 HLA are matched. Then in that case the matching of HLA is 3 upon 6. In that case we can give at least, we can actually think for the transplantation between me and my cousin. Otherwise otherwise if we transplant, then most of the chance is that the transplanted kidney will get rejected by the cousin body, and that will be of no use. So things are not easy as we think. So if the matching is 1 upon 6 or 2 upon 6, then there is a more chance of rejection. So more chance of rejection by the recipient body. If the matching is 3 upon 6, then I said you that this is a minimum criteria that the rejection is somehow not possible. So acceptance is somehow possible in this criteria, but we have to keep something in mind, that we have to give like some medications like anti-CD25 and bacilliximab. So these are the drugs which we should give in the patient. These will actually help to get adapt in the recipient body. It will actually promote the it will actually inhibit the rejection in the recipient body. So at least if the matching is 3 by 6, and if you will give this drug at the time of starting, so at the time of starting of the in starting days, so at the starting days, if these two drugs are given, then it will be more easy to accept by the donor. I mean accept by the recipient. And another is, if the matching is 4 by 6 to 5 by 6, then there will be no requirement of the induction therapy. So no requirement of any like this. So this therapy which is given in the starting time is known as induction therapy. So induction therapy is required in case of the 3 by 6 matching, but if the matching of the HLA is 4 by 6 to 5 by 6, no requirement of induction therapy. So no requirement of induction therapy. And once the induction therapy is given, then there are some more therapies which will be given for the lifelong, so that in the later stages of life the kidney will not get rejected. So there are some drugs. These drugs are actually given for all patients, at least 3 by 6 to 6 by 6. So every patient, I mean 5 by 6. So every patient should actually get the maintenance therapy for the to avoid rejection. So the maintenance therapy include so maintenance therapy is given for the lifelong. See, induction therapy is given for some period of time at the time of starting of the kidney transplant. So once the transplant has took place, then at the time of starting we will give the induction therapy. But for the whole life you will take the maintenance therapy. So it will be taken lifelong. And in the maintenance therapy, the drugs are like steroids, tacrolimus. So there is a trick STM. So steroids, tacrolimus, and one is the mycophenolate. So STM, you have heard ATM, remember STM. So steroids, tacrolimus, and mycophenolate. These are the basic drug for the maintenance. But there are some more drugs like azathioprine, and sirolimus. So these are the things which we need to know in actually transplantation of kidney. Now let us suppose that your kidney has been rejected. So let's suppose we will talk about the rejection. So if the rejection occurs within actually minutes, so within minutes of transplantation, you can write within minutes of transplantation, if the rejection take place, then we will call it as a hyperacute rejection. So when we will call it hyperacute rejection, see these are MCQ questions, so don't skip this part. Remember this part also. If the rejection of the kidney occur within minutes of transplantation is known as hyperacute rejection, and it is due to the type 2 hypersensitivity. Reaction. Okay. Another is if the rejection occurs in less than 6 months. Then we will call it as a acute rejection. And it is basically type 4 hypersensitivity. So type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Okay. And if the rejection happens in greater than 6 months or after 6 months, then we will call it as a chronic rejection. And it is also type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. So rejection are basically 3 types. Can occur within minutes of the transplantation, known as hyperacute, can occur in less than 6 months, acute, and can occur after 6 months, known as chronic type of rejection. One of the major actually we can say the complication after the transplantation. So basically I will talk about the complication. So the complication after the transplantation, one of the complication is opportunistic infection. So why there will be opportunistic infection in the transplanted, or we can say post-transplant kidney patient? The reason is being that they are usually on the steroid therapy or such type of therapy which will actually depresses the immune defense system of the body, or we can say decreases the immunity of the body. So that's why such person will have the opportunistic infection. And if the infection occurs in less than 1 month, then usually the causative agent is methicillin resistant staphylococcus aureus, or we can say the agents may be some herpes simplex virus. So the agent can be methicillin resistant staphylococcus aureus, so staph aureus, or herpes simplex virus. And if the infection occur after 1 month up to 6 months, then the agent can be usually it can be the cytomegalovirus, it can be pneumocystis zerovecii, it can be hepatitis B, hepatitis C. And if occurs after 6 months, then the agent can be aspergillus, agent can be nocardia, and can be a virus known as BK virus. So you can see the one of the complication after the rejection is after the transplantation is the opportunistic infection. And the opportunistic infection occurs due to the decreased immune function in the body due to taking of the steroid therapy, or we can say immunosuppressive therapy, in order to adapt the kidney in the body. And if infection occur within 1 month, then the agents usually are staph aureus or herpes simplex virus. If it occurs after 1 month up to 6 months, then the agents are usually cytomegalovirus, pneumocystis zerovecii, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. And if the infection occurs after the 6 months, then the agents usually are the aspergillus, nocardia, and the BK virus. Let's see. Let us suppose he is actually donor. And he has 2 kidneys. So one kidney is right kidney, another kidney is left kidney. So you should know in the mind that usually from the donor, he is actually donor who is giving the kidney. So usually the left kidney is taken. And actually in the recipient, let's suppose he is recipient, then in the recipient, the left kidney is taken and inserted in the right iliac fossa. So the left kidney is taken and inserted in right iliac fossa. And what we will do to the already damaged two kidneys. So there are already damaged two kidneys also in the recipient body. So we will not do nothing to that those damaged kidney. We will also add a third kidney as a this kidney is good kidney in the recipient body and usually inserted in the right iliac fossa. So we can say that the kidney from the donor is taken usually from the left side. So left kidney is taken and it is actually inserted in the right side in the recipient and usually in the right iliac fossa, that is lower to the already present kidney, and the already present kidneys are not removed from the recipient. Now let's suppose these are the right kidney and the left kidney of the recipient, and let's suppose this both kidney are damaged. So usually what happens, the blood flow to the right and left kidney is via the renal artery, but when the extra kidney or the transplanted kidney actually is when the kidney extra kidney is added in the body of the recipient, let's suppose it is a body of the recipient. So when the extra kidney is added to the body of recipient, then the blood supply is now joined to the iliac artery. So this artery is known as iliac artery. So the blood supply is actually joined to the iliac artery and these two kidney are remained in the way as they are present, and the extra kidney, that is the donor's kidney, is placed in the right iliac fossa. So it is placed in the right iliac fossa and the blood supply of that kidney is attached to the iliac artery. So we have to look the iliac artery first before doing transplantation. So before doing transplantation we will also do MRI. So MRI is done actually to rule out the iliac artery. So MRI is done to rule out the iliac artery calcification or any problem in the iliac artery, as we took the blood supply from the iliac artery. That's why there should be no any problem should be present in the iliac artery. So basically if there is a calcification of the iliac artery, then we cannot use that iliac artery and in that case so I mean to say that usually before doing the transplantation we will actually do MRI. So MRI is done basically to rule out there is a problem in the iliac artery or not, or there is a iliac artery calcification or not.